Hello there, it's Fiona from Weekly Sewing Bee. Okay, so today we are making curtains. Now this is for my porch window, so it's a really tiny window, but in a way it's good because I can talk you through every step and I can explain what you'd do if we were enlarging the project. So what we're making is curtains to fit an 18 by 24 window, so 2 foot by 1.5 foot. It's really tiny and it is only a porch window, and we're going to put tabs on the top and then they're going to go through a sort of wrought iron pole. So first things first, how much material do we need? Now it needs to be 21 inches long, 24 inches long, so we are going to make 2 curtains to cover a 12-inch hole, so we're doing 2. European curtains, by the way, so I know, yeah, it's an English thing, but it's fascinating. So that's what we need, 2 by 12. Now I always recommend that we go with at least a third extra. So now we've got 2 times 18 by 18. So that's fine, that's fine. Most of my windows in the house, I know you've seen it before, but there's my window, is what we'd call 3 drop lengths of fabric. So what I have to do is I have to cut 1 line of fabric in half, and then I sew 1.5. But I don't need to do that today because it's quite a small window, but I will be discussing pattern matching with you. Now I'm going to make it lined, and I'm going to use a thermal lining here. I hope you can see. Basically it's white cloth and it's got a black layer of cloth sewn into it. And also, if we feel this material, it's kind of tacky, and that's to give it the thermal properties. Now this is like the best stuff you can buy, but it does make it a bit more tricky to sew. So fully lined curtains, and because of the hemming and everything, in a way it's easier to make lined curtains. So fabric. Now, as I said before, we do have to discuss pattern matching. So what I want is 2 curtains, and when they meet together, the pattern is the same. So I can have a little look-see. Now on the end, on the selvage, on a lot of cottons, they will tell you the pattern match details. This one doesn't, but we can still work it out quite easily. Now because of the size of the window, in a way it's going to be easier to pattern match with going long ways. So what I'm first of all going to do is I'm going to take my straight edge. I need half an inch hem allowance, but I also want to do a fold over of 2 inches so that I can only see the fabric, I can't see any of the lining. So I'm going to pick a point and I'm going to mark that with a pin, and I'm going to fold down this line. Now I want to keep it straight. It's going to be a lot easier to pattern match if the fabric's straight. And now that I've folded it over, you can see where the points are, that there's 1 point, there's 1 point. So I either need to match up these 2 points and work out where it's best. So pick a point of the fabric that you can recognise easily and slide this fabric along so that we can match it up. Okay, so we now know that this is going to be our end of our fabric, And because with the hemming allowance and the fold at the end we've given ourselves, it is actually 2.5 inches. We then need, from this point of the pin, to do 18 inches and then a 2.5 inch on the other side. So I'm going to mark that with a pin, and this is one curtain done, but we do have to still pattern match and cut the other curtain. So if I can just unbury my scissors, and I always recommend that you find the biggest flat surface you can. So whether it's you cut out on the front room floor and move all the furniture to the side, or you know, it's very much like that. So yeah, but we're doing a small curtain, so we can probably get away with it. Now it's really up to you. I'm going to use pins because I'm working with a small fabric, but ideally, if you're not going to be able to finish any project in that day, in that sitting down session, unless of course you're lucky enough to have a sewing room where you can just walk away and leave it, but if you've got kids and husbands and all sorts of things, then I would thoroughly recommend you use safety pins, just to pattern match. Okay, so all I'm doing now is I am literally rolling it till I can pattern match along. So I know I need 2.5, but I've in fact had to knock off another inch to do my pattern matches. So rather than leave that excess, I'm now going to trim it off. And there is a lot to be said for either having a colour code for your own pins as well, or something like that, so that you know that this is the middle bit of the curtain. So I'm just doing this for eye by speed, but cutting is the most important thing, so we do have to be very careful. So that's one end done. The other side of this curtain is very simple. I need to do 18 inches, and then I need to do 1, 2.5, so that I've got matching size. And it is one of those things, you will always know if you've done slightly wrong. Nobody else will know, but you will know. Now I'm going to line that up with that pin, and then I'm going to cut. So I have my fabric now cut out. The next job is to cut out my lining. Now if you have ever been in a position where you've washed a set of curtains, you will know that it's the lining that shrinks. So what I'm going to do, or the fabric shrinks so you can see the lining. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my lining hangs lower so that I've got this edge over so that I can see, so that I don't see. Now, I've got this folded in two so I can do it in one time, and I'm lining it up with the top corner of one of my curtains. If I take the other curtain away, then I will be able to show you a bit more clearly. Now, my lining needs to be smaller than my curtain, so, but it still needs to cover the window. So it is a matter of, if we think of our window as a drop of 18, and then we give ourselves at least 2 inches of hem allowance for the lining, and then we give another 2 inches so that it completely covers the window. Then that means we have got the excess of 1.5 inches, maybe 2. So that is the height of the lining, slightly smaller. And then the depth of the lining is going to be exactly the same size, excluding the 2-inch fold. So we're still going to have our hem allowance, but we're not going to have the folds. So we have now, if we slide that down, we have our fold marked with a pin for one side. So we have this line here, and we now have to take off the other fold from the other side. So we now have the markings for our lining. Now if we were pattern matching panels, we would do it the same as we did pattern matching the middle. Now if you go into the shop, and it's a good shop, they will help you. They will say, okay, you have a hole 4 foot by 5 foot, so you need 3 drops and you need a third extra. So sorry, you will need 3 drops to make that extra third, and then you will need 3 foot and maybe a little bit either end. So the basic measurements are 3 times 3, and however much you want overlapping, and I would probably, the minimum I would do is 6 inches. So we now have 3 times 3 foot 6. So you would have to buy 3 yards plus 1.5 yards for the excess, and then however much the pattern match is. So if the pattern match is 6 inches, you are going to need an extra 3 lots of 6 inches so that they all measure up. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Sewing is about maths. It's not about sewing. It's more about maths. So, you know, getting these measurements right and getting your cutting right will make life 100% easier. Okay, so we've done that. Next job. And it's quite a simple one, really. So that we've got everything as nice as possible, we are now going to hem the lining. And you know that adage? Measure twice, cut once. So I'm just holding it up just to check which is the top and the bottom, because you're going to end up pretty much with a square. Now I'm going to place the lining once, twice, and all I've done is fold it, and I'm going to sew down the bottom. So now, because of the type of fabric this is, it's going to bounce back quite easily. So it's up to you. You can pin it, you can tack it, you can iron it. Because of the coating, it might not iron that well. If you were to iron it, what I would recommend is you put some paper in between the fabric and the iron. Okay, so that's done. Now what's going to happen, because we've done this seam now, is that this seam is going to be sewn into the fabric, the main fabric proper. Okay. Now, next step. We know we have our middle, we don't need to worry about that now. What we do need to do is we need to place both right sides out, and then we're going to sew down the long seams. Yeah, we're not going to sew the top just yet. Once these are done, then we are going to line it up and remeasure it so that we don't have the lining in the middle. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down there, I'm going to sew down there, and then I'm going to turn it inside out and I'm going to sew again. So I'll be back with you. Okay, welcome back. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit the camera quite that hard, so it moved. So what we've done, we have sewn right side to right side, turned it inside out, and then sewn on the wrong side so that we've sealed in these seams. And it just gives it a much better finish, and it gives it a lot more longevity because you can just wash it. And although I love taffeta, it like bleeds fabric. We've also hemmed the bottom before we started of the lining. Now the reason we didn't hem the lining, the outer fabric, is because we didn't know how far the lining went up, so we didn't really know where to put our hems, but we needed to do that. And then when we hang the curtains, because the curtains are going to hang like that, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack those up and tack the bottom seam up. It just gives it a lovely finish. But I have folded it over the once, and I am sewing the once, and you can see that there's a natural lie of where it comes down because we've already sealed in those seams. So we are getting there. Now, it really is, the biggest job is the measuring, I think. And once you've done the measuring and everything's cut straight, then life is a lot easier. Yeah, okay, so now we need the tabs at the top of the curtain. Now, yeah, we're back to the maths again. We need to work out the height that they need to fold. They need to fall down, because if they fall down too much and you've got too much light showing, then it doesn't work. If you've got quite a fat pole, a fat pine pole, then you need to work out how much that is. So the best way is get a tape measure and pull it all the way round. Don't just hold it up, you've got to pull it all the way round. And then this bit you have to do by eye. Are they huge curtains? Are they going to need quite a few tabs? Or are they quite small curtains? And are they quite thick material? Could you get away with quite thick tabs? Okay, so that one's your own, the width and the size. But I'm going to go for 3 quite small tabs on my curtains. And I've got the measurements I need. So I have cut a strip of fabric that is 6 times the length of the tabs that I need, and it is twice the thickness plus my hem allowance for the width. So that's very easy. You know, once I've done the maths, I can then just happily sew. I folded right side to right side, and now I am sewing a long line down with the seam allowance that I've given myself. No, maybe I could have done this off screen. Maybe. And then I'm going to turn it all inside out, and then I'm ready to go for the next stage. Hello there, welcome back. So I now have my 6 tabs. This is for the top, and I now have my curtain with my centre fold firmly marked. this is the right side, and all the seams are sealed, although I do need to trim my loose ends, and the bottom is hemmed as well, except for the tacking up, but I'll do that when I hang the curtains, just because that's how I do them. Alright, so what I want my tabs to do is I want this centre seam to be square in the middle, and I want them like that. Now, because we're doing French seams, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this sticking up, and then when I turn it inside out, I can then sew in my seams. Now, this again is aesthetics. I would recommend for all these type of curtains that we go for a 6-inch interval. Now, if you're using very heavy fabric, maybe sort of medieval tapestry, then I would make these tabs thicker. If you are going for a sort of standard weight fabric, a nice cotton, then I would go for 2-inch wide tabs. But because I'm going for a nice light taffeta and I do want it to look nice and light, then I'm going for slightly smaller. Now, the middle one should be in the middle. And then what I'm doing is I'm matching up the other one. So I can use that pin, and then technically I'm now committed to sewing. So yes, always measure twice. You know, if you're not sure about French seams and which way they're going to end up, then yeah, maybe even work it out on a bit of paper, fold a bit of paper. So there we are. There we are, and there we are. So, I'm ready to go. I'm going to line it up with the machine. What I want to make sure is that I catch the lining underneath as well. I've got to watch out for those pins. The last thing I want to do is to break my needle. Now, you'll hear the difference in the machine when it goes over these tabs, just literally because they're, you know, quite a few layers of fabric. I'm just going to allow my sewing machine to take the fabric. Now, because, well, traditionally, the fabric you use to line is not the same as the fabric you use to make the front, we do have to be aware that sometimes some types of fabric are better at being picked up by the machine. So obviously I'm saying that the machine's going to like the lining, and it might be a bit more different with the taffeta. So just going to have a little look, check that these are straight. This is the time to check and to change your mind. Make sure that there's no puckers in the fold. All I'm using is the closed scissors just to do that. Make sure there's no, and that they're not sticking off at an angle, because that means I've sewn them in wrong. Okay, so I'm happy. Next stage, turning inside out. It's good practice, isn't it? So what we have now is the rough ends of these tabs. I'm going to push out the corners just so that we've got that nice crisp, and it will make the difference to the hanging as well of the curtains. And then I just drop the whole curtain on the floor. But sometimes my problems are my own. I'm going to give it a good shake. Now, I don't need these tabs sticking up here being a nuisance. I'm going to get rid of them. It's just going to make it all a bit blotchy. I've got to do it sooner or later, so I'm doing it now. Lovely. But one thing I do have to make sure is that when I sew this top seam here, these tabs are hanging down straight. So, easy enough. I've got 2 layers of taffeta here. This is the fold. I'm going to begin sewing, and I can feel the ridge there, but if I'm unsure, I can stick my hand in here and just make sure that those tabs are still hanging down straight. Of course, I'm going over a lot of fabric when I'm sewing over these tabs. You can see I'm just pushing it up from under my finger, and that is just to check again that the tabs are lying downwards. Okay, so yes, when you're going over thick fabric, it's entirely up to you. You can slow the machine down and turn it by hand. When you know your machine very well, I'm not recommending this, I actually speed up so that I've got momentum to help me push through. If you are sewing really heavy fabric and you put it under the sewing machine but the foot doesn't go down, then always make sure you put the lever down even if the foot isn't actually going down, because otherwise you're not connecting with the bobbin. Alright, yeah, I'm talking too much. Okay, inside out, round the right way now. So we have our tabs sitting up as neatly as we can. We do have to trim all our frayed edges. Yeah, it's the price of sewing with taffeta. Honestly, I think if I leave a square of taffeta on the room and then measure it in the morning, it'll have shrunk by about a third. So, now if our measurements were correct and we were very patient with ourselves, we can just line it up and these should match. But, yeah, if you can't sew in one go, I thoroughly recommend safety pins. And not only do I recommend sort of safety pins, when you place it, mentally note that the sticky down thing, that's the line, okay? Because otherwise you've got a line here where it's not stuck down, or a line here, so you're now out by a good ½ inch. Okay, thank you ever so much for watching. It was actually a lot longer than I hoped, and yeah, but such is life. Alright, thank you ever so much.